So, welcome to day 2, and it's my pleasure this morning to introduce David Stansfield, G0 Echo Victor Victor, who is going to be talking about the challenge and the thrill of operating portable from mountain summits. Until he retired about 10 years ago, David was a chartered engineer and a chartered manager working in the power industry. First licensed in 1986, his interests have included homebrew equipment, operating in the outdoors and CW. He's an experienced hill walker and was a mountain rescue team member for 15 years. He's activated all of the 330 Wainwrights in the Lake District and achieved his SOTA Mountain Goat Award on mixed modes and CW. He promises us an interactive session, so don't fall asleep, or you maybe have a question thrown at you. So over to you, David. Thank you very much.
So, first 2 questions. Hands up if you've actually operated portable off a summit already. Excellent. Second question, who intends to operate from a summit in the future? Fantastic. So the whole class now wants to do summits on the air or some other version of it. That's a great start. Thank you very much for that. Right, so what I'd like to do is just give you an idea about what I do, but most of all, it's not about what I can do, it's what you can do. And I want to try and give you the tools that will allow you to do that safely. There are people in this room who've done a lot more than I have. Much, much more. 5 times more. So we're all here to have an experience of what we do. But what I can actually say is that every time I approach a summit, the last 100 meters, my stomach is in a knot. It's always the same. I always think, there'll be nobody on. There'll be no chasers. I won't make any contacts. I'm wasting my time. I get to the top, get the kit set up, get on the air, make 4 contacts, and it all changes. All of a sudden, I'm thoroughly enjoying myself. It's great fun. And that's the thrill that I think is in there. I did spend a bit of time looking at why we do this, and we might look at that at the end, perhaps. So, after 36 years of standing on tops of mountains with the rain down or it's been snowing on me, I still enjoy going on tops of mountains and activating them. So as I say, my task today is to try and inspire you into having a go or developing the skills that you've already got. If you have any questions as we go through, I'm quite happy to take them as we go. It's a short one, it's some of clarification. Just put your hand up and we'll try and include you. But I will get some time at the end to take it forward a little bit. Okay. So there we are. That's me in the Lake District about, what will that be? 15 years ago, Buttermere. And I am definitely portable. That's man-portable, and it's quite a big distinction, because we use this term portable when we've got a vehicle there, and we're stationary when we're not on public roads. This is man-portable, with the aerial at the top, of which I've got some information about there. So, the main project we have in this country is the Worldwide Summits on the Air programme. And that's the activation of Marilyn Hills. Hills with a 500-foot precedence. That's to say they stand up 500 feet from the surroundings. And there are now literally hundreds of activations taking place every single day worldwide. And probably about 50 in the UK. It's very, very popular indeed, and rising in popularity. There are also a number of other programs. We mentioned about Martin there, said about the Wainwrights on the Air, which is specific to the Lake District and covers all of the 214 Wainwrights and the Outliers, making 330 activations. They're great fun. And in fact, the Outliers, I think, was the best part of the program that I've been working with. We've also got humps, which are Marilyn's excluding, humps excluding Marilyn's, HEMA for short, trig points on the air, worked all Britain, they're included, and of course we've also got other ones, an international one called the Parks on the Air, which is rising in popularity as well. So there's lots of different programs out there, but essentially what we want to do is to be able to operate safely. There are also a number of competitive contests out there as well. This was me in 1987, operating off Bullsworth Fell in the Northern Pennines in the Practical Wireless 2-metre contest. We came 5th. It's the only one I ever did. And that's a 19-element beam there made from Mr. Judd's out of thin air. And there's also the RSGB low power contest in the backpackers. So there are lots of other things out there which are competitive. Of course, what it is really, it's an excuse, isn't it? It's an excuse to get out there, use our radios, in the sun, in the green, and enjoy a bit of the two put together. We all do it differently. These were only 3 weeks ago on top of red screes. I'm glad the wind didn't change, because if it did, I don't think it'd been there any longer, but not to worry. So the important thing is that the stated goals of these programs include that they are non-competitive. And that's critically important, because it allows me to operate on the walk bands and also on 60 metres. So they're not competitive. Well, we don't record it anyway. I think that would be the right way of putting it. We compete with ourselves, but we don't have a competition. So, just to get us started, let's look at a few definitions. Because we just need to make sure we all understand, so we all got the same story, particularly one or two on here. So let's have a look at these definitions. First of all, the activators. They're the ones who climb mountains and get wet. The chasers, they're generally back at home in a nice warm shack, but not necessarily, because you can chase a mountain from another mountain. So you don't have to be necessarily there, but it gives the opportunity for a wider audience of people to be taking part. Then we've got S2S, summit to summit. I suppose this is more or less the pinnacle of amateur radio and as far as summits on the air is concerned, because you're operating from one summit and talking to another summit. And that can be quite challenging, particularly when they're many thousands of miles away. But the systems we've got that run all this, the computer backup, is very useful in making sure that happens. Then we've got a thing called completes. That's when you've activated it and chased it as well. And that makes you've done all that you can possibly do at that summit. Uniques are summits that you have climbed and activated. And there's another one called the activation zone. Now this is a very, very important definition. It's the top 25 meters of the hill. So you can operate from anywhere within that. And you can use that very much to your advantage. First of all, you can keep out of the way of those horrible people that are on the top of the hill at the same time as you, because they get in the way, and you get in the way of them. So keep away from the top of the summit if you can. And it also allows you to use the shape of the hill to your advantage. So the activation zone is very, very useful indeed. So let's move on to something that's a bit more worthwhile. I'd like to deal with two topics today. The first one is Hillcraft, and the second, radio skills. So we'll have a look at those two in a little bit of detail and see what we've got. Okay, if time permits, I'll also give you a description of a very, very recent activation in northern Scotland. And it's a very interesting activation that I did. I've been waiting to do it for 63 years, so it's quite an interesting one. I hope that we can manage to fit that in. So here is my list of the Hillcraft topics. Is there anything on there that you would like to add to? Well, planning, the hazards, personal equipment, other equipment, personal fitness and endurance, and navigation. Are we all happy with that? Does that cover the subject? Excellent. Say again?
Are the shorts obligatory?
Well, you were in that time of day. I mean, that was 1986. Yes, of course they were there. Yeah, yeah. HB9 CV and the rucksack as well. Okay, right. So we'll look at those and see what we can. Thank you. So the first one, planning. There's some P's, aren't there, in here? Proper planning and preparation and all of that. Absolutely vital. In fact, Phil mentioned it yesterday, how much time he spends in getting ready to go and do one hill, two hills, or a multiple of hills. And of course, it's quite a bit of the fun, actually, in preparing the ground and knowing exactly where you're going to go. So let's have a look at those. The sort of things I look at, where is it? The route. We've got a map there that's been annotated with the route and the location. In my early days of Wainwright, I twice, not once, but twice walked over a Wainwright without realising it was there. That was a bit of a waste of time. Sometimes there are access issues. There are a couple of hills in the Lake District which are a bit tetchy, and in the rest of the country there's a few others as well. So sometimes you've got to perhaps go early in the morning or get the permission to do what you want to do. So access can be a difficulty. There's a lot of information on the web, and we'll deal with that at the end, but there's a lot of sites out there that will give you lots of information, and that's very valuable to you. I'm a map man. I don't use a GPS. I use a GPS, but not one on the phone. And I make my map ready. It's in a plastic wallet. This has been on the hill, sealed inside, and it's a very large scale 2.5-inch map. So when it's chucking it down, as it will be, I can still manage to read this, and the whole route is on the two sides of the one sheet of paper. I find that's my best way of doing it. So making the maps ready for my route is also part of the planning process, in that I now understand what my route is and what I'll be looking for. There's a reference usually that we need to keep as well. LD001, or GLD001, is Scarfell Pike. And if we're going to be on the top of that, we want to make sure we're giving the right reference out. I think Phil would agree with me, and Colin, that if you look down the reflector on SOTA site, you'll find that there is about one a week if somebody's got it wrong. And it really does make a real mess of everything. So it's critically important that that reference is recorded, and I then put it into my waterproof logbook so I know exactly where it is that we're going. And then we come to timing. Now then, a question for you. Why is timing important? You're right. Not necessarily, but it's a good point. The time of day is very, very important to you. So timing helps you to make sure you've got that right. But don't forget there are the people at the other end, these chasers, who want to make sure they've got back from the shops in order to work you, because they're critically interested in doing so, getting that time right. So I'm going to introduce you to a new term. You haven't heard of this before. It's called the bog time. B-O-G. The bog time is the critical time. Now what's the bog time? It's boots on the ground. Okay? That's when we've just set off. So the bog time determines where you're going to, how long it's going to take to get to the top of the hill. You now know what time it is you're going to be activating. You can also work backwards. And from the bog time, you know what time you've got to get up to drive there, what time you've got to go to bed the night before in order to get some sleep. So it all fits together. So the bog time, new term, is important to you. How long does it take us to get to the top of a hill? Well, the best way of doing that is to measure it. Here we have a little map measurer. You run that along the map, and it will give you the distance that you're going to travel. Multiply that by what you believe is your ascent speed, probably 2 to 3 kilometers per hour, and away you go. So we now understand what time we're going to get there, and that's the time that we can then record on the website so that people know where you're going to be. That's putting out the alert. The alert tells the computer when you're going to be there. When you've got to the top, you can put out a spot to say I'm here, and then that sets everything in motion. So that's the sort of planning process that's getting us to the right place at the right time. The weather, we can't control the weather, but do take a great deal of interest in it. Wind speed above 25 miles an hour, that's my top limit. I think Colin and I have got the same view on that. It just gets too dangerous. Information on that comes from MWIS, Mountain Weather Information Service, which is usually very pessimistic. And then also the normal wind, weather that you've got, the weather, BBC weather, and of course, what it looks like out there as well. Set your GPS so you've got the route of where you're going, and away we go. Okay, let's move on. Hazards. This is where it comes around to you good people. We're going to go up there on this hilltop. This is my friend Mike. It's blowing a lot more than 25 miles an hour there. He could hardly stand up, he's like this. So there we are. So, what are our hazards? We've got one already. What is it? Correct. What else have we got? Sorry? Rain, yes. Although it's a bit of a hazard, it certainly can make navigation much more difficult. So rain, yes, I've got rain on here. Visibility, yes, you've got that in the background of there as well, haven't you? If you can't see, it takes a lot longer. Navigating in full fog at night time is very difficult and very slow as well. So your absolute visibility, if it's a nice blue sky day, it's much easier. I put slips, trips and falls, because you're going to do that lots of times. We all fall over, don't we? The older you get, the worse it gets. Another one, any more news? Any others ideas? Lightning, I've got lightning on here, yes. 2 people killed on Ben Nevis the year before last in lightning. What we're going to do, we're going to stand on the top of a hill and put a 25-foot pole up in the sky. Is it dangerous? You bet it is. What happens if you get it crackling or you've got crashes in the background? What do? Leg it. Big steps. That's what you take. Okay. Bogs. This isn't the timing. There's another one. Bogs. If you ever see green, all the mountaineers in here will know, if you see that light green colour, don't stand on it. It will swallow you up. I know 2 people who've been up to here and wouldn't have got out without the help. And often we are lone walkers. And that's a very big risk. We're doing everything ourselves. If the wheel drops off, we haven't got a spare. Right, we've got that. We've got slips and trips and falls. Any more? Temperature, absolutely. Both at the cold end and at the high end as well. The high end, I think, is probably the worst one of the 2. How much water do we need to take with us?
Depends on the hill and the type of weather, really.
You're right, it certainly does. I had a recommendation from the people doing DFE, which was 6 litres a day. Can we carry 6 litres? We can't. We end up dehydrated, I'll tell you that. I think that happens every time. So dehydration and temperature is another major one. Anything else that we lost? Sunburn, yes, be careful. You need a hat on your head. There's not much between you and the atmosphere, so that's another important one. There's navigation. Nobody, pardon me. We didn't mention navigation, but navigation's a very important part of this. And if we get it wrong, we can get ourselves into very devious situations. I've once, in Wales, walked off the map in fog. And what I always do now, as well as carry that, which is the very high detailed one, I also carry a 50,000 scale, which is a bigger scale map of the surrounding area, including all the roads. So if I do get it in the wrong place, I can manage to get myself off. Rain and fog we've got. I think we've got almost everything here. Benighted I've put on here. There's a risk if you go and get too much, take too long over what you're doing, you can get to the point where you've run out of battery power on your torch and you're going to be benighted. So lots of risks out there. You're going to be careful of all of those. Okay, let's move on. Thank you for your help. Personal equipment. This is what you're wearing. Now I came dressed for the occasion, all right? I always wear nothing nowadays except polyester, right down to the shreddies. Sorry about it, ladies, but everything is polyester from the top to bottom because it gets wet, and if it's very wet, the water runs out. If it's not too wet, it dries. And if you want, you can also take it off and put another layer on. So polyester all the way. How many pairs of trousers do I wear? Any ideas? 2? We're going upwards. 3? No. 4? I've been known to wear 5 pairs of trousers in the winter time. If it's -10, I'll have 5 pairs of trousers on. There'll be base layer, 2 pairs of thinner ones of these, 1 of these, and a waterproof over the top. Chest, about the same, about 5 layers. Perhaps in the winter time, if it's very, very cold, a duvet as well. So I've got an earth duvet on top of that. So an awful lot of clothing to keep me dry and warm. Well, not necessarily dry. It isn't about keeping dry, it's about keeping warm. And the water, let it run away. Gloves, my circulation isn't what it was. I wear 3 different sorts of gloves. The pile gloves, finger gloves, and also texting gloves. I use texting gloves for sending Morse code. It is definitely an art form, sending Morse code with gloves at -5 degrees centigrade. But you get used to it. It's something different. And the quality of my CW gets up so much better. Boots need to be good ones, and I'd recommend 1 pair of socks. But if your feet are cold, what are you going to do about it? Walk a bit? Yes, good idea. Or you make sure you've got enough trousers on. That's the thing, you could put the insulation on, warm your legs up, your feet get warm. If your hands are cold, what do? You make sure you've got enough covers on here and learn from that. So it's about keeping warm. Have I missed any personal equipment out there?
Dry spares?
I don't carry dry spares, but I know some people do. I was on the top of Great Gable last year for the commemoration of the First World War. I was activating it as a special event as well. And on the top of there was a guy completely stripped off, down to his shreddies, sorry about that ladies again, and there he was, and he got fully changed when he got to the top. The important thing when you're doing summits on the air is that you don't chase up to the top, because you're going to be sitting around and getting cold. So I always slow down a little bit as I get to the top, and you're absolutely right. A change of clothing is not a bad thing to do. But I might have another spare layer, but that would be all. Okay. Hat, don't forget the hat. And I wear a necker. I think I've probably got it on in there. A necker, which is just to keep this bit warm, because it's helping to keep me up that way. So keeping warm is very, very important. I've missed one there, sorry, missed a slide. Other equipment, which was on that other slide, we've got a mobile phone, yes, but generally I find that mobile phones sometimes don't work, particularly when you're above a conurbation. There's so much noise on the mobile phone networks that you find that the mobile phones can be blocked altogether, but see how it goes. I carry that. I also carry a spare. And I've got a mobile phone here, which, don't laugh at me please, it's a G2. G2 is the best network going on Vodafone. 700 megahertz, we understand that. And this will send out text, which I can use as a spot, and it weighs very, very little. And it's fairly waterproof, particularly when it goes in this little bag, where it is then fully waterproof. So a little mobile phone is quite useful. We also need food, the water we mentioned, a compass so that you know that you can check against the map that you're going in the right direction. An emergency pack, batteries in it, spare food, first aid kit, paper and pencil so you can leave that with someone else if you need, and a knife, that sort of thing. And I also use a bothy bag, and you'll see that a bit later. Bothy bag is a big bag which 2 people or 3 people can get into and keep warm. So that was that one. Okay, we'll move on. Personal fitness. When I was doing a check to see why people went up SOTAs, I found that many people said it was to keep fit. I think it's also important to be fit before you go out. Some of these days are long. 14 days, 14 hours rather, on one go can be not unusual. So it's important that you're both fit and have the endurance. So make sure that that's continued. I wouldn't recommend these, by the way, but those are a bit excessive, those weights. But you need some sort of exercise before that to make sure that you're up to doing what you're doing. Okay. Navigation, as I say, I use maps exclusively. I've tried using GPS or phone-based maps. Not very successful for me. I did have an experience on the Cairngorm Plateau was October, it was snowing, visibility was very poor, and out of the murk we saw two guys walking towards us. There were two Germans, and they said, "We are lost." And I said, "Okay, what can we do for you? Can you get your map and we'll show you where you are?" Haven't got a map, all we've got is the mobile phone. We've been out here 2 days, the mobile phone's flat, no maps, don't know where we are. I don't know where they would have gone from there. They're in a very precarious position. 4,000 feet up on the plateau is not the place to say, "I don't know where I am." So navigation, very important. Generally, I work on the 25,000 or the 2.5-inch map, which is this one, and a lot of detail on there, and a compass and a GPS. I use the GPS to, it's just point in the ground. I can say, yeah, that's exactly where I am. 10-figure grid reference, the 2 letters at the beginning, and that's exactly where I am to the nearest meter. Navigation on a day like today is very different to the day when it's fog levels down here, it's blowing 25 miles an hour, and you can't see where you're going. A very different thing, particularly if it's at night time. And of course, water gets everywhere, doesn't it? So make sure that you've waterproofed it wherever possible that you can. Where do you get the training for navigation? Difficult these days, but I know that the scouts will help you, and also local walking groups will probably do so as well. But it's important to be able to read the map and get the information from that. Okay. We move on. Radio skills. Have we missed anything? I'm going to keep this fairly short because I think we all know our radio skills, so we'll move through this fairly quickly. Aerials are always an interesting topic. That's a pair of HP9 CVs set up at a Welsh hill on the CW weekend. I worked Colin on this one. I also worked a German station, which was DF0WD. I was very chuffed with this. 800 kilometres on 20 watts of CW on the 2 stacked HP9 CVs. We also we have 2 modes really. We've got the man portable we saw at the beginning, and then we've got where we put a mast up, and we've got an aerial from that, whether it be VHF or HF. I use the flower pot aerial for most of my 2-metre activities, and that goes on the top of the mast if I wish to do so. So that's quite handy, and a good coverage with that, and it's nice and simple. And for HF, mast at about 20 feet, which is a put-on mast, so it doesn't telescope down, and an aerial on the top of that, which is usually a link dipole. Some people use end-fed half waves, but I prefer the link dipole. And anywhere on the top of the summit, really. But VHF, you tend to try and go on the right on the top. But as far as I'm concerned on HF, I tend to go just on the cusp of the hill, on whichever wind, where the wind is behind me. So I'm in that little circulation point where it's nice and quiet wind-wise. And that's the point I operate in. And that's usually a few metres off the summit as it is. Coaxial cables. I use RG58 mostly for the cable going up the pole. I use 213 on the HF, on the VHF on that sort of aerial, and 174 for the manufacture of the flower pot aerial. So a various number of different aerials there. Yes, it has been done. That's a 19 set, and it has been carried to the top of a hill in southern England to activate a summit on the air. I don't think we want to carry it up Snowdon, would we really? It's a bit on the heavy side, is that. Power, generally from batteries, although people have used other methods. But it's power management is really what it's about. This is a double LiPo cell coupled together, paralleled up, which gives me 10 amp hours. It depends on what your consumption is, and there's a little calculation you can do to see whether you've got the right power levels to make sure that you get the length of time up there. I tend to spend around about 2 hours on a summit. So 10 amp hours gives me a 50 watts the CW for about a 2 hour duration, and that does me. Power transmitters and receivers. Hang on, we've missed a sheet. Is that gone? There we go. Electromagnetic field, definitely an issue these days. What do we do? Well, we can do the calculations, get yourself an idea what position we're in with electromagnetic field. But we've got the public rounders. And I think the only sensible thing to do is if you're in any doubt, stop transmitting, and that then makes sure that's been sorted out. Whether I would want to do what I did years ago, which was operate 40 watts from a rucksack on VHF, I'm not sure. I think I might have learnt from that one now. Perhaps not do that anymore. But if you keep the power levels down, it's not a problem. If you're only running 10 watts, well, it doesn't apply at all. But beams, yeah, I think there's an issue there and needs to be given some serious thought. But stopping transmitting is the solution, which will work perfectly well. Website support is very good. This is the list of spots popping up on SOTA Watch, and there are other ways as well to see what's going on. So website support's very useful to us. The alert tells the system that you're going to be up there. The spot says, I'm here now, and you can also send a text out via your little mobile phone, which will also trigger all of that. The RBN network is very, very useful indeed. I'm able to go onto the top of a hill, and within a few minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes of putting my call sign out, I'm picked up, fed through onto SOTA Watch, and there's a spot appears to say G0EVV said he would be on LD001, and he's on there now. And of course that helps the chasers tremendously. We must always help the chasers because we need them all the time. Accurate log keeping is incredibly important. We mentioned it, Phil mentioned it yesterday. Waterproof paper and pencils in a waterproof pack. Try and make sure that the log is sensible, and then uploading that onto the same website. So that's all very, very useful support information. Any questions? Okay. Operating on the buzz. I'm not going to say a lot about this, but there is definitely a buzz that you can get from operating on top of a hill. This is inside the bothy bag. 2 of us in there. It's extremely sweaty. Very noisy because the thing's rattling all the time, but we still get the fun of doing that. We've got people wanting to operate from, chasers on the top, and it's good fun. We're wanted, I suppose. I usually manage about 1 QSO a minute. It goes up and down a little bit. If there are a lot of people chasing me, I go faster than 1 a minute because I don't want them to be standing around too long. I don't want to be lasting much more than 1 minute because I think it's important that we're able to keep things moving along. The important thing on the summit, of course, is that the noise threshold is very low, and we can get good takeoff. All of that adds together to make it a very, very different experience to being at home, where you've got the noise levels are high and you've got all the rest of the conurbation around you. So that makes it a great pleasure to do so. And you've got your mini pile-up, and people want to work you, and it's the fun of working your way through that pile-up. But very, very important to look after those chasers, because you need those, because if they don't work you, then there's no point being there. So do look after your chasers. Okay, just about on time. Change of subject now. Sullivan. GMNS060. Nothing means, it's just a number, isn't it? It's an iconic hill. Sullivan sits 30 miles north of Ullapool. It's 350 miles from Morpeth, where I live. It's 550 miles from here, so it's not an easy place to get to. Anyway, there's a good reason for doing it 63 years on. This was my dad. That beard didn't last very long, by the way. But this was my dad, the late G6ZZA. He'd been a handicraft teacher for most of his working life. And in 1958, he built a PBK-20 canoe. It's a two-man canoe, and it was made of canvas, had a canvas hull. In 1959, we went to Scotland. The canvas canoe came with us on the roof of the Ford Popular. We camped at a Kilty Buoy, which was, still is, 30 miles north of Ullapool. And we had a great time, as I say. That was my dad. He didn't last the year. There's the canoe from Kodachrome 2 photographs. And I used the canoe very successfully for fishing. But my father had a different idea altogether. He wanted to climb Sullivan. Sullivan is 7 miles from nowhere. And the ground round it is very, very difficult to walk over. And at that time, there were no paths. So he and a long-time climbing friend decided to climb Sullivan by, first of all, paddling 7 miles along, I can't remember the lock number, from Elphin, and then ascend and come back down in a day. There it is. That was 1959. And it is a charming hill, isn't it? When they got back, they did look rather knackered. 13 hours it took them to paddle, climb, and come back. Time passed, and I didn't get the opportunity to go and do Sullivan. And I thought, oh, it's not going to happen. Then this year, I discovered that there's a mountain bike trail on the other side which runs in from the north side. And I thought, that might be the solution, because I haven't got a canoe. So I managed to think about 63 years on, can I manage to do this? So the plan was coming together. But I thought, 73 years of age, this isn't to be done on my own. But fortunately, a friend of mine decided that he would also come along. That's M0TFK. So we set off on the 8th of September with a 4-day pass, a 3-night booking in the local Lochindra bunkhouse. We both had HF equipment. I won't bore you with the detail. FD891, because he's newer than mine. My 857, batteries. Roy's an SSB man. I tend to go towards CW. And we decided we'd go out there and do it. The plan was for Roy to do 40 and 20 metres, and I would do 30 and 60 metres. So that was the plan. We budgeted for a 2-hour slot on the top of the hill. We also carried 2-metre handhelds so that we could get that elusive complete. We were going to activate chase the summits as well from each other. So that was the plan, and there it is. What's the bog time at this? The bog time there was 6 o'clock in the morning. It's just coming light. So after a substantial meal, we cycled or drove up to where we were going to drop off, and then we cycled away. Still dark when we set off, and we really enjoyed ourselves going on up there. The sky was like aquamarine colour. It was really quite special. Looked like a good day. Then we got the mountain bike trail. It's a bit rough for me, I must admit. I'm not the best of mountain bike riders, and my balance isn't what it was. But we did get along there, and it saved us about 40 minutes, which is 40 minutes that are very valuable in both directions, of course. We didn't have any gravity incidents, didn't fall off. So we saved some time, and there we were. And it's beginning to look like a good day. No fog. So the trail up Sullivan from this side goes up to the Beelac. The Beelac on the top's where the path goes over the top. And the John Muir Trust have done an amazing job of repairing that. Done a very good job indeed. So we go across, past these two lock-ins, and then up to the BLAC. There it is. That's Roy on one of his moments. There we are. We won't tell too much. Here we are. We're nearly there now. We've just got to get to the top of there. So it's in range. I think there are a couple of bad steps from there, but we managed to do it. And that's the last bit up to the summit. Glorious day. This is an interesting bit here. I could recommend this one. It's like that. No, it's a bit narrow. It's about that wide. That's the path. And on a windy day, that's going to be quite interesting. That was the view back at the other summit, which is slightly lower, thank goodness, because it's a heck of a job to get up that one. That's the eastern peak. Me near the top. And we've got there. There we were. Roy's operating at one end, I'm operating here. We found we had to operate separate times because we were just so close together, but we did manage 50 minutes apiece. It's the view from the shack window. Can't beat it, can you, really? Anyway, we just got there. We'd all finished. And we were just tidying up, and there was a lady came across, and she used the usual question, please can you tell me what you're doing? And I said, well, I'm activating the hill, and I'm following in the footsteps of my father who did it by canoe. And she said, oh, that's interesting. We've just done exactly the same thing. They canoed from Elphin and camped and then got up and done the hill. So it's a small world. You have to have the odd little tot of whiskey to say thank you very much, Dad. And that's us on the way down. So there we are, that's it. Thank you very much. Those are the references to the different organisations you get information from. And I thoroughly enjoyed that trip. It was really a special trip for me. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for David?
Sorry, let me get you the microphone. Sorry. How do you manage to keep so fit? You say you're 73?
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. I got a hill walk all my life and climbed in 16 countries and been into radio on and off during my life, but never got into SOTA, unfortunately, because I've been all over the world, really.
How do I keep fit?
Yeah, I'm only 60 and I'm not struggling, but I'm not finding
Monday
it that easy.
is Zumba. Tuesday, I cycle to Ashington and do Zumba. Wednesday, I do body balance. No, I don't. I do body pump and I do Zumba. Thursday, I do aerobics and Pilates. Friday, I do body balance.
Wow. Yeah.
Weekends, I climb mountains.
My wife's Chinese. I imagine she's very agile, and she does keep me, because I've got a bit of arthritis in the knees from climbing.
I wouldn't recommend doing everything I do. It's daft.
No, that's brilliant though. Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Must have been a secret.
If anybody's interested, if you can get the film Edie, then you can have a good look at Sheila Hancock when she climbed it. And it's some very good shots on there. It's a very interesting thing. So, any other questions?
Yes. On one of the slides, when you were talking about electromagnetic field, I didn't completely understand the problem you were referring to. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Okay. The EMF requirements. First of all, is it less than 10 watts? Then it isn't an issue at all. That doesn't, so if you're just using a handheld into whatever aerial, then there is no issue. Other ones, I think at the levels of power that we tend to run, yes, there could be an issue on EMF, and you need to do the calculations to do that. And okay, that would help a great deal. And certainly if you've got a 2-meter aerial and you're running 100 watts into it, and the aerial's here, yeah, there's an issue. So the calculations have to be done and have to be available. If all else fails, the main way of avoiding the public's issue is stop transmitting. And that's all. That was my main line of that. That you have 3 things. One is power level. If it's low, not a problem. If it's high power, yes, you've got a problem. You must do the calculations. But if all else fails, stop transmitting.
Are there any more questions? Just one second, I'll bring the mic.
Gen G4HIZ. Anyway, you're talking more about HF VHF.
Yes.
Just from an observation, I've done it using a microwave system. And the very first outing was in the Pyrenees in France. Now, I used the expertise of somebody else who knew the tracks. There's no doubt about it. But 2,000 metres up, the atmosphere was very thin, and we were extremely sunburned. Even with a coat on, you could feel it coming through.
Yep.
Hazard. Another vehicle turns up, 12 hang gliders get out and start jumping off the mountain in front of you. So, you know, but 200 milliwatts to get 600 kilometres using 10 gigahertz, that was the sort of achievement that we got.
Lovely challenge, and you got a great big buzz from it, didn't you?
Oh, it was good.
Absolutely.
Especially when they come out with a special whiskey at the end of it. Anyway, but it's a great thing, and I must admit, it's inspiring to get fitter before we go for the big ones.
I would endorse that. I think it's important. It's important to say that it helps your fitness, but I think you need to be fit before you go and do it, because they are long days, or can be long days. Yeah, are we finished? Or?
If there are any more questions? If there aren't, then let's just thank David again.
Thank you.
And we'll all look forward to seeing him at the summit somewhere.
Yes, thank you.